Hi, my name is Pete with Wingman Studios, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to take a look at another fallacy within our video series talking about audio quality fallacies, that there is no difference in audio converters and software. So just as a quick reminder that the goal of this fallacy video series is to help anyone who's interested in saving some time, money, get rid of the frustration when it comes to popular beliefs that we might have adopted along the way, and that ultimately held us back from progressing further and faster in our musical endeavors. Now, these videos are sharing my experiences. It's not necessarily A/B testing, and we're not going to be pulling out test equipment and nerding out over spec sheets, even though we might reference these from time to time from other people's findings. I wouldn't have bothered with any of these videos unless challenging these popular beliefs would ultimately make a difference. And I've had to over the years because of the fact that, again, these things were holding me back. We already went through the monitor video. We talked about a cable video. I appreciate all of your guys' comments and responses in that. And in some ways, I wish the fallacies were true, you know? If the fallacy was true, it would have saved me money, it would have saved me time, and it would have been a heck of a lot easier. But what ends up happening is these belief systems and trying equipment that doesn't necessarily meet their claim ultimately holds us back, and it held me back in terms of moving forward within these areas, especially within the studio. So these fallacies ended up costing me, because I either had to take a loss on the equipment that I had purchased, take time to figure out why the gear I chose was underperforming, as well as repurchasing something of a better quality that in most cases cost me more money. Now, I'm listening. I'm listening to what the gear is doing. And if it doesn't sound right, or if it doesn't improve the audio, then I want to know why, right? And part of it, you can look at spec sheets. You can get into some empirical testing, maybe find other people who have done testing on the gear maybe that you have purchased. To be honest, what's most important, though, is what does it sound like? And I will use an example of one of my heroes, Rupert Neve, who shared an example within a lecture of creating a preamp with pristine specs that took years for him to create, only to find out that it didn't sound as good as his other creations with less performing specs. Now, this means you could have underperforming equipment measured against a spec sheet that sounds better. The word better is subjective. It's a very subjective word. Rupert Neve's standard of the word better, or something that sounded good, or something that sounded superior, was, does the equipment reproduce the sound and the environment that the sound source is created in? So there's two parts to it. There's the sound itself, and then the environment, early reflections, and the space in which it is created in. Does the equipment do that? Can the equipment make the sound even better than reality? All right? In other words, make the music sound surreal, or the instruments sound bigger than life. Most equipment is manufactured with multiple components, which then add to the compounding variables, both positive and negative, to the gear's performance and its sound. ADD conversion, this is true, and it's also true with software, all right? Because there's many components within an ADD converter. There are many pieces and parts, if you will, virtual or code that's being used within software to make something do, sound, perform in a certain way. All of these things can play a part in what you're actually hearing. So let's steel man the statement, you can't hear a difference between converters, software, or even sample rates. So if you can't hear a difference, ultimately, you might as well just save your money. Don't be spending your money on things that are more expensive. Don't go with higher end gear if it doesn't sound any different. Let's go the cost-effective route in the equipment, software, or maybe even let's go with lower sample rates, 44.1, 48K. Everybody's using those sample rates, maybe not 44.1 as much, but 48K seems to be like a standard. And, we can move files back and forth, and we can, have access to really any plugin at that point, and be able to, work with the music under that sample rate. So the statement is ultimately true. There will not be a difference in audio if you can't hear the difference. All right? So the key is hearing the difference. So two ways of looking at it. You can think, well, actually there's no difference, and the people who do hear a difference are kind of, they're crazy, or, they don't know what they're listening to, or it's a placebo effect, or they're reading into it too deeply, or these types of things. Could these things be true? Possibly. But I don't necessarily want to straw man the person who can hear something different. I want to kind of take a look at this, and I want to learn, I want to discover, and maybe figure some things out along the way. So it's possible that the music you're listening to doesn't allow for you to hear the difference based on how the music was recorded and the genre of the music. So there's music that's out there where the whole concept of high fidelity really isn't even in the wheelhouse of the genre, where lo-fi sort of is a standard, and they don't care about that. They want it rugged. They want it sounding rough. If that's the case, you're probably not going to hear a big difference when it comes to ADD conversion, analog to digital conversion. But there's other music, there's other genres where it makes a massive difference. And I believe it can make things sound wonderful, beautiful, spacious, all of these other, kind of adjectives that we use for high fidelity. So, and if there's no dynamics in the music. So if the dynamics have been sucked out, everything is sort of compressed to the hilt, brick-walled up, everything sounds like overly pumped loud, these types of things. That dynamic range and this high fidelity element of being able to not only hear the music, hear the instrument, and also the space that it's in, many times goes out the window. So if the style of music and the way it was recorded doesn't leave room for nuances that would normally be heard with well-engineered converters that are able to record in high resolution, it will be impossible to hear the difference. So even the highest detailed converters won't help here. Why? Because there is no detail to convert, right? The converter is taking an analog signal and converting it over to digital. If there's no space, if there's no fidelity in the audio to begin with, you're not going to hear it. It's not going to be there. So you're not going to get magic dust with a converter thinking that, well, just because it's a high-end converter, obviously it's going to sound better. Well, what ends up happening is sort of the garbage in, garbage out type of understanding. You're not going to get something more from something that's not there to begin with. That's the point. If you know what to listen for, ultimately you can hear the difference. So compounding variables work across all systems, both positive and negative. Converters have two main parts, the analog portion and the digital conversion portion. Both are very important. Let's take a look at the analog output stage components. While not chips, these are not chips necessarily in that analog stage. In the traditional sense, the analog output stage of a DAC typically includes various discrete components, such as op amps, capacitors, resistors. These components play a crucial role in shaping the final analog audio signal before it reaches the output. If we take a look at the chips, the DAC chips, digital audio conversion chips, they come in various models and configurations, each with its own specifications for resolution, sampling rate, and signal-to-noise ratio and dynamic range, basically how it handles the audio. Clocking chips, this is another area. Clocking chips are essential for maintaining precise timing in digital audio processing. High-quality clocking chips minimize the jitter, which can degrade audio quality by causing timing errors in the digital signal. This is more heard when you have nuances of the music, nuances in the sound, okay? So if the nuances aren't there, probably you won't hear a big difference. So in other words, if the original track or the way it was recorded, the way it was mixed, doesn't have those things, you probably won't hear it. This is why we have to use our ears. One thing is for sure, we do not listen to audio gear with single test tones alone to prove the sound quality. So I know I haven't done it. I don't go through my oscillator and just kind of run into like, hey, let's get to a 1K test tone and hear the quality of my 1K test tone. That's not what we do. I don't do the same thing with white noise. So we don't use that as a benchmark for audio quality necessarily. Yeah, you could use white noise to tell if you have flatness in a room. You can blast the room with white noise and begin to kind of see if how the room is responding. But even white noise doesn't respond like music. Music is a lot different. There are way more variables in music than there is in white noise. Music is a wonderfully complex combination of tones, timbres, percussive hits, transients, harmonic overtones, reverberations, delay reflections, dynamic ranges with infinite variation and combination, all with unique intensity based on style, performance, tempo, spectral roll-off, time-based energy, ramping and decay. There's a lot to music. Remember that it's not just the instrument and its source making music. The space the music is played in also is a major contributor. I don't see a lot of tests accurately measuring all of these details all at the same time. We underestimate the complexity of what music is and the ultimate human hearing and the ability of human hearing and sensitivity to perceive it. It's not magic, it's not unobtainium, it's not unicorn droppings, and it's not placebo effect. If somebody can hear something different, or if we can tell something is better than something else. I believe the difference that we hear in comparison to a spec sheet, let's say as an example, is based on elements overlooked or discounted in the measuring. Measuring the combination of things rather than just one thing at a time. Just because we don't have a way to measure why something sounds different than another thing doesn't necessarily mean that that thing doesn't sound different. Is it possible that we're missing a compounding measurement somewhere? The common response usually given by the person who can't hear a difference looking at a spec sheet will say it's placebo, or you are hearing something that's not there. But here's a question. What if it's not placebo? If we basically write it off as a placebo effect, the trouble with that is then we can't be curious, we can't ask any further questions, and we can't discover something new. Ear training is a skill. Experience and listening is something that happens over years. Both of these things take time. There are things that I was oblivious to when listening just even 5 years ago compared to now because I didn't know what I was listening for. It's been a growing experience, and it seems like it never ends. The company, my company, has been involved with video production since the early 90s. The popular fallacy back then was that 640 by 480 video resolution was more than enough for the human eye to see. A common TV for home use at this point, 4K, that's a standard, goes up to like 8K and beyond, I believe. Thank goodness somebody challenged the fallacy to allow for curiosity, discovery, and innovation, and not that, well, the human eye can only see 640 by 480 and that's enough. That example deals with the perception of eyesight. Human hearing is capable of high-resolution perception. Away from recorded music, we hear high fidelity in nature every day. Where a bird chirps, the sound of the wind, cars going by, all of these types of things, children playing and laughing, appliances in the house, dogs barking, right? All of these things. Music is just a wonderful organized extension of physics and nature. And as much as we try in music technology today, we can't get around the laws of physics when it comes to audio. And sometimes when we try to sidestep physics, usually the audio quality, the audio facsimile takes a hit. In other words, the ability to make a recording or capture the audio where it sounds exactly like it was played, okay? So, or as it was generated, as the audio was generated and then captured. Music is wave energy, and music is ultimately a moving target. It is highly complex, especially if we're attempting to capture music in its entirety. In its entirety is the key phrase, whether single instrument or playing multiple instruments simultaneously, all of this stuff combined, as well as the room that it's in. In the 90s, when we were told that digital was replacing everything analog. I can remember studios were like getting rid of their tape machines, trying to get digital this, digital that. They were trying to move into, get rid of their analog consoles and things like that. Analog consoles, I mean, they were selling them off, for really low prices, things of that nature. Then we began to realize, hey, these things had a lot of worth still, and that there was audio quality that they offered. And so that began to slow down. But at that point, we were like, all right, we need to get the best audio converters we can get our hands on, or within our price range or price point. And we had to get software. So we had to get a computer, all of these things. The Mac was coming up. The Mac was the music machine back in the day. Major players were DigiDesign, Opcode Vision. Those were on the MIDI side or the sequencing side. And then using Mac 2 computers. Those were some of the early heavy hitters when it came to audio and actually recording audio. I had a Mac 2 Effects. When I bought that machine, I thought it was in heaven when I got it. It had all those card slots, and you can fill that dog up. It was great. I didn't have my hands on every A to D converter over the years, but I've had my experience with many. Here's a little memory lane. Let's walk down together. The first one I had was DigiDesign Session 8, DigiDesign Sample Cell for recording samples and early virtual instruments played back. What was cool about that is I had that all working in a Mac 2 Effects back in the day. Then came DigiDesign 001. That still had a card, kind of a small, like one space rack type of interface. DigiDesign 002, that sort of came in like two flavors, but that was Firewire based. Then there was the DigiDesign TDM systems, the larger systems, card based as well. Then Apogee Rosetta. In there, I ended up getting a Focusrite Scarlett cheap unit, just kind of as a DAC, to kind of play back things and to listen to stereo audio. Lynx Aurora N 192 mastering converters. That was a wonderful improvement. We have those here in the studio now. And the latest is the RME high resolution mastering converter. And this thing sounds absolutely fantastic. We'll discuss it a little bit more. And since we're talking about audio capture, of course, we're going to have to add tape into this. And in the tape department, there was a myriad of simple 2-track machines, 4-track machines, 8-track machines that I've worked with. Then we start moving into larger machines, Tascam 1-inch 16-track, Fostex 1-inch 16-track, MCI 24-track 2-inch tape, Alesis ADAT digital audio tape, that was on VHS, Tascam DA88, that was on high 8 digital audio tape, Panasonic DAT, so small DAT tapes that were used for mix downs, right, and mastering. So Panasonic had a wonderful machine. Tascam had a decent machine as well. And then, of course, there was a myriad of different still reel-to-reels that were either quarter-inch, half-inch, that were used for mix down. And one of the machines, we have a machine even to this day, it's an Otari MX50 quarter-inch half-track. 2-track master, we still mix to this machine because it's a high-resolution machine. It sounds really, really good. The best audio capture I ever heard was a Studer, 16-track 2-inch at a recording session in California. I was playing bass for that. This particular machine's claim to fame, all pieces of equipment have a claim to fame, was previously used by Leonard Skinner for Sweet Home Alabama. I don't know if that's true, but one thing that I do know is that the machine sounded fantastic. The low end was luscious. It was gorgeous. It sounded great. The thing was running through I believe it was a Harrison mix. I'm sorry, not Harrison mix bus. It was running through a Harrison console at the time, and boy, it was really, really good. And what's interesting, every one of these units sounded different, including the tape machines. So within the digital domain, in my experience, the differences became more apparent the higher you go up in manufacturer, and then the higher you go up in sample rate. You're going to see these things perform better and sound better. Early analog to digital converters were lackluster, and the three that we still use in the studio right now, we have the Aurora N 192K, the Apogee Rosetta 96K, and then the new one was the RME super high sampling rate, and DSD 256, which is even higher. Pretty amazing. In leagues all their own. All of these sound different. The Aurora and Apogee are used for tracking and to track playback. The RME is a separate print rig that I can use in conjunction with the Otari MX50 when it comes to mix down. And they both sound really, really good. The Apogee, what's interesting, the Apogee keeps up with the Aurora N really well at 96K, but we don't use the Apogee for, like rhythm section parts of the recording. The 96K, this is the max resolution of the Apogee. The Aurora N at 192 is far superior once you start moving up on those higher sample rates. The RME and Tape Machine, they're really in a class all their own, okay? The RME, it samples at 768 PCM. It's super detailed coming off of the recording desk. It's super detailed coming off of tape. DSD 256 is even more detailed. The dynamics are fantastic in this. It's 1-bit technology, okay? So DSD was developed by Sony Philips back in, I want to say it was in the 90s. This is where the SACD came from. And they had real tight licensing on the technology. And because of probably the way that they marketed it and the way that they released these SACDs, it was probably one of the reasons why it didn't get more popular. But the audio quality was absolutely phenomenal. And DSD works completely different than PCM does, and it's way more different to and way more difficult to manipulate in terms of editing in these types of things. But it sounds really, really good. You get the dynamics, transients, the separation, and the soundstage, as long as you're not compressing or overly compressing. DSD 256 is a single line of 11,289,600 bits per second of information, not stair-stepped, okay? DSD is direct stream information, while PCM is pulse code stair-stepping sampling, okay? So you're dealing with little samples, and then what happens is there's, within the steps, there's sort of like inference between all the little steps of a PCM sample, where here in DSD you don't have it. It's the closest you're going to get to analog style recording, complete waves, in terms of recording, if you were to compare it to analog, okay? So, also, the higher sample rate in PCM, the less digital filtering is necessary, minimizing digital filtering, noise switching above 20K. And you'll see this when you start to move, when you're at 92 and above, okay? So if we reflect back to the Otari MX50 ATR master tape, people think that, tape is just ancient, antiquated, and has no value. Let's talk about that. 1 second of ATR master tape at 15 inches per second has 80 million particles with infinite dynamic stepping within its total dynamic range, with frequency ranges below 40 hertz and then above 22K. 80 million particles. The resolution of analog tape is in a class all of its own. Tape at 30 inches per second, you're working with 160 million particles per second. Your resolution doubles, okay? It's not even in the same league as, tape is way higher in resolution based upon the I guess it's iron oxide particles that are reproducing the audio for us. Resolution and frequency range work together. Remember that frequency range and resolution are not the same thing. If we go back to the television example, think of the pixel of the television as resolution. Think of the frequency range as color spectrum. You can have limitless color spectrum at 640 by 480 resolution on a video screen or on a television screen, but guess what? It's not going to have any more resolution. 640 by 480 is what you're going to see. In fact, it'll probably look the same. Until you increase the resolution working together with the color spectrum, you won't see the difference. Just like in audio, it's important to have both. In audio, we're striving for both frequency range and contiguous audio waves with all of the trimmings offering the highest resolutions. ATR did the right thing, pursuing the refinement of tape technology, giving the audio industry the highest potential audio resolution if bits and particles are one-to-one comparison. Now, we know that they're not exactly one-to-one, but these are the things that we would be measuring to be able to get a sense of what the resolution actually is. High resolution conversion offers details that you just don't get with lower sample rates. All right? A mistake that's made in converter shootouts is people will take pre-recorded multi-tracks or even stereo tracks looking for some great improvement in playback. So in other words, the tracks that they have were not recorded through the shootout necessarily. They could have been recorded somewhere else. They bring those tracks in, and then they're comparing two different types of interfaces. Interfaces are like mirrors. They're going to mirror what's already been done, all right? If the quality of the audio isn't that great or is highly compressed or both, the difference between the converters will be negligible. You won't really hear much of a difference. Where the quality of the converter shines is when you have solid audio going in, utilizing, of course, quality mics, cabling, instruments, quality preamps, EQs, modules, etc. Of course, our preference here is to employ analog mixing out, giving another layer of punch and dimension in the process. The same is true if you're trying to do like an upsampling. Some people think, well, let's just upsample the audio and it'll be better. You don't get anything more out of it because the audio essentially is just being mirrored at a higher sample rate. You don't get extra audio quality, okay? So we have to realize that there's not going to be magic dust, on the ADD conversion if you don't have something great to work with from the very beginning. So here's the point. If you give a high-resolution converter a low-resolution track, you still have low-resolution tracks at a higher sample rate, right? So if the track or the audio coming in is compromised, you will print the compromised audio. Now, software also plays a part of the sound and how it handles the sound once it's digitized. Okay, there's a lot going on under the hood. Most people don't even know or understand how this works. This is self-evident because every plugin on the planet seems to have its own utility value, and what it does is perceived, or the sound quality of what it does is perceived differently. Many times people are trying to look at a plugin that claims to be a certain compressor and then compare it to the analog counterpart. Hey, does it sound the same? Is the quality the same? All of these things. So there's differences there no matter what. DAWs that I've worked with were DigiDesign Session 8, Pro Tools of all forms, Logic, Ableton Live, Harrison Mixbus. Plugins and all of these have their own subtle characters. The two softwares that impacted me the most were Pro Tools and Harrison Mixbus. Pro Tools has a sound. Harrison Mixbus has a sound. Until you kind of A/B them, you don't hear the difference until you hear them, back to back. I was an early adopter of Pro Tools and have used it for years. To my ears, across all the resolutions, including 192, Harrison Mixbus sounds smoother. I think it sounds closer to analog, even though it's still working off of PCM technology, but whatever they're doing under the hood with that, there is a difference. It doesn't have all the pokiness. It's not as harsh on the edges. So in conclusion, ADD converters do make a difference. Sample rates bring this out even more. Tape is fun to work with and is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to resolution. Even older Apogee converters are really good. The new Aurora N is awesome. The RME running at 768 and DST-256 is in a class all of its own. We'll probably do videos on all of these at some point as time goes on. Final encouragement, have fun exploring and discovering. That's what this is all about. It's to have some fun, okay? As musicians, we do ear training all the time. Ear training is just as important in music engineering. Maybe this video will help you in your musical journey, making decisions with your gear. The better something sounds, guys, this is my personal experience, the better it sounds, the more inspiration comes from it so that we can create more, we'll pursue more, and we'll be able to make the best of the best, in our process. The way I look at it, let's make great music for people who care, right? Let's make music for the people who are more of an audiophile type of position, They want great things. Let's pursue that, and because they're looking for great stuff all the time too. So I hope this helps you. My name's Pete with Wingman Studios. Until next time.